Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome to Dr. Roomi lectures. Now let's talk about the transport of adrenocortical hormones. As corticosteroid hormones are lipophilic hormones, which means they are highly lipid soluble and very less water soluble hormones. So that's why they are extensively bound to plasma proteins. For example, 90 to 95% of cortisol hormone is bound to plasma proteins so that it becomes water soluble and can be easily transported in our plasma. Cortisol can bind with two types of plasma proteins, albumin and globulin. Globulin is a specific protein. An alpha globulin, called as cortisol binding globulin or CBG, also called as transcortin, transports about 75% of cortisol. About 15% of the cortisol is bound with albumin. Albumin is such a protein in our plasma which binds non-specifically to lipid-soluble hormones. So about 75% of cortisol is bound with the transcortin, which is alpha globulin. About 15% is bound with albumin, and 5 to 10% is freely transported in our plasma. It is the free form of cortisol which is physiologically active. The bound form, which is about 90%, is physiologically not active. If you talk about aldosterone, 60% of aldosterone is bound to plasma proteins and 40% is transported freely. And the major plasma protein to which aldosterone and androgens, for example, dehydroepiandrosterone binds, is albumin. Because the bound form of cortisol is much more, so this is why it has relatively longer half-life of about 60 to 90 minutes. And the bound form of aldosterone is because it is relatively less for aldosterone as compared to cortisol. So this is why aldosterone has a relatively shorter half-life of about 20 minutes. Although the bound form of these corticosteroid hormones is physiologically not active, but this acts as a reservoir for free hormones, which means that when free hormone will decrease in our blood, from the bound form, some hormone will be released so that the free level hormone will remain relatively constant. So what is the importance of this reservoir or the bound form of hormone? This decreases the fluctuations of free hormone in our plasma. In case of stress, which can affect the level of cortisol and aldosterone hormone in our blood, this reservoir decreases the fluctuations of adrenocorticosteroids in our plasma so that there is relatively uniform distribution of the adrenocorticosteroid hormones to the tissues. Now let's talk about the metabolism of adrenocorticosteroid hormones. We need two important organs. One is liver and the other one is kidney for inactivation and also for excretion of adrenocorticosteroid hormones from our body. Liver makes these hormones inactive through some conjugation process, and then kidney excretes these hormones in urine. Liver conjugates these hormones mainly with glucuronic acid and also with sulfate. And in this way, these hormones become inactive. 25% of these conjugates are excreted through bile in feces. And the rest of 75% conjugates of these hormones with glucuronic acid and sulfate, because they are water soluble, they enter into our plasma and through kidneys they are excreted out in urine. So what will happen to the metabolism and excretion of corticosteroid hormones in case of liver and kidney disease? In case of liver disease, there will be decrease in the rate of inactivation, which means that liver will decrease the conjugation of these adrenocorticosteroid hormones, hence their rate of inactivation will be decreased. And these steroid hormones will stay in our body for longer period of time, their half-life will increase. And in case of kidney diseases, for example, chronic renal failure, the rate of excretion of these conjugated metabolites of adrenocorticosteroid hormones will be decreased. It means that even if they will become inactive through conjugation in the liver, but their excretion through kidney will be decreased. Now let's talk about the concentration of these hormones. The concentration of aldosterone in our blood is 6 nanogram per deciliter. Such a minute concentration. 100 ml of blood contains only 6 nanograms of aldosterone hormone. But this is so essential for our survival. And the concentration of cortisol hormone is 12 microgram per 100 ml of blood or per deciliter. These are the average concentrations of these two important hormones. However, their concentrations they may fluctuate slightly. Important factor which affect the rate of excretion of aldosterone or angiotensin 2 and potassium ion, and the important factor which affects the rate of excretion of cortisol is adrenocorticotropic hormone, which comes from anterior pituitary. The level of cortisol hormone is highest in the morning when we wake up, for example, at 8 a.m., and its level is lowest when we are just going to sleep, for example, at 10 p.m. In our next session, we'll study the mechanism of action and functions of cortisol hormone. Thank you so much for watching this video. See you next time with another video.